not a dividend.
It's a tale of two clans.
Now, your losses are on someone else's balance sheet.
Generally speaking, airdrops are kind of pointless anyways.
Unnamed trading firms who are very involved.
I like that ETH is the ultimate concept.
DeFi protocols are the antidote to this problem.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chopping Block. Every couple of weeks, the four of us get together and give the industry insider's perspective on the crypto topics of the day. So quick intros. First, we got Tom, the DeFi maven and master of memes.
Hello.
Next, we've got Robert, the crypto connoisseur and czar of Superstate.
GM, everybody.
Then we've got Tarun, the Giga Brain and Grand Poobah at Gauntlet.
Aloha.
And today we've got a special guest, Ogle, crypto cyber sleuth and negotiator.
Hello, hello.
And finally, I'm Haseeb, the head hype man at Dragonfly. So we are early stage investors in crypto, but I want to caveat that nothing we say here is an investment advice, legal advice, or even life advice. Please see choppingblock.xyz for more disclosures.
Before we even start, can I make one point? Tom is on his like Steve Jobs era, like in this episode. He's got the black turtleneck. I feel like I'm ready to.
Steve Jobs doesn't have a monopoly on the black turtleneck. I can wear a black turtleneck.
Elizabeth Holmes.
It's Steve Jobs. Elizabeth Holmes and Steve Jobs. It's pretty tainted.
Technically, it's navy, but the camera just not picking it up. The white balance is off.
It doesn't look very navy.
Don't you guys think this is a different aesthetic for Tom? I just am not. It's a little bit different.
It's Tom's winter wardrobe.
Yeah. It's cold in New York. I have to dress for the weather.
You gotta warm that neck up. I got it.
We don't know each other, but I would say you've got the Iris Apfel look going on yourself.
I do. I love Iris. One of the best dressed women in history.
It is true.
Okay. Well, so the reason why we brought Ogle on is that it's been a very crazy week for exploits, and specifically around an exploit in KyberSwap. So KyberSwap, for those of you who don't know, it's a very OG DeFi protocol, way back in the day, founded by Loy Liu and a couple other folks. And KyberSwap on November 22nd, so about a week ago from today when we're recording this, so KyberSwap was attacked by what's been described as an infinite money glitch. So essentially, there's a very, very subtle bug in the way that it was essentially doing math to figure out the edge cases around how different parts of the liquidity curve was being calculated. And based on a very, very tiny error in calculating some of these liquidity boundaries, an attacker was able to drain almost all the money that was held inside of KyberSwap. So about $50 million was stolen across Arbitrum, Optimism, and Ethereum. The hacker themselves was a very colorful hacker. They left a lot of charming comments in the process of the hack in the event logs, leaving comments such as, Step 2, finding liquidity required. Is it enough? And a much more salacious description of what they were doing to the contract. The KyberSwap then advised everybody to withdraw their funds, and they offered a 10% bounty for the attacker to return their funds. And it seems like this may have been connected to the index finance hack that occurred 2 years ago, which was perpetrated by this guy, Andean Medjedovic. However, apparently $2 million was sent to an address that was controlled by that guy, but it may have been misdirection. Nobody really knows. It's hard to prove any of these things. So 2 days later, after the hack, KyberSwap announces to the attacker, please return 90% of the funds that you took from users by 6 a.m. UTC on November 25th. Otherwise, we are going to pursue you. And the hacker responded, again, through on-chain mechanisms in the sort of memo field of a transaction. Negotiations will start in a few hours when I'm fully rested. Essentially telling people like, oh, chill out. I'm not ready yet to have this conversation. KyberSwap then, a couple days later, they recovered about $4.7 million through front-running bots that apparently, some folks who were front-running some of the attackers through generalized front-running, they were able to front-run some of the attackers' attacks and recover some of the money, which was sent back to KyberSwap. Then, yesterday, the hacker sent another message to KyberSwap saying the following. I said I was willing to negotiate. In return, I've received mostly threats, deadlines, and general unfriendliness from the executive team. That's okay. I don't mind. I have prepared a statement concerning our potential treaty. I plan to release it on November 30th at noon UTC sharp. Under the assumption I'm treated with further hostility, we can reschedule for a later date when we all feel more civil. You need only say the word. If not, we proceed as planned on November 30th. Thank you. So this has been kind of a weirdly dramatic hack. So the hacks in DeFi happen all the time, but the nature of the attacker and their communication style struck me as very strange. And so I'm curious to get your guys' reactions to this.
This feels like a group of people instead of one, because I feel like the change in tone didn't feel like quite consistent. Usually I feel like the attackers are more consistent than this.
So the reason why I brought on Ogle to discuss this is that Ogle actually is involved in the negotiations with the Kyber hacker. And Ogle has some experience working through a bunch of these different hacker negotiations, which is honestly very new to me. I've not really seen how these things play out. I always assumed they were somewhat ad hoc, but it seems like actually there are a lot of repeat players. I don't know if the hacker's a repeat player, presumably perhaps, but the negotiators and the people who are, kind of solving this on the protocol side seem to be repeat players. I don't know what you guys think of this phenomenon, but it does seem to me, I wrote a tweet there about this earlier, it seems to me like this whole dynamic between protocols that are getting hacked and the negotiations with the hackers is becoming more and more professionalized and more standardized. Like in the past, it was quite chaotic. It was very hard to find these people. Nobody really knew how to reach them. And people just assumed that the attackers run away with everything. And now it's become standard to have this kind of negotiation. You give back 10%. Things seem to be a little bit more calm. I don't know what you guys think of this and how this is affecting the dynamic in attacks on DeFi like this.
Well, as an outsider to this, I mean, the first hacks that I remember were really the BZX ones that kicked off sort of like the DeFi protocol trend of getting hacked. And that was much more chaotic. I mean, recoveries were zero. I don't even think that there was the expectation that there would be recoveries. I think it was like there's this common expectation, like following the first hack of all time, really, the DAO, where it was like, okay, that's the end. Once something is hacked, it's basically game over for that smart contract and for the expectation of the users that had assets inside of it. And that's really changed. I mean, at this point now, there's starting to be playbooks that are being written and a lot of, standards that are starting to emerge. And I agree with you, Haseeb. It definitely feels like we've come a long way over the past, I don't know, what is this, like 3 years, really, of smart contract hacks.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think also just, the story 2-3 years ago even it was much easier to anonymize assets and, get them and sort of desegregate them from the attacker address. And then, they're sort of gone. And that's obviously harder to do now. But also, I think the flip side we've kind of seen is, in these negotiations, it's always sort of this leverage point of, hey, you give us most of the money back. We won't bring in law enforcement and we'll sort of call it a gentleman's agreement and go handshake. And I think there was just a charge like 2 months ago. It was like the Southern District charged some engineer in New York with hacking some protocol, even though he returned most of the funds and they sort of reached some negotiation. And so it's like
Mango.
It's actually it was not Mango actually, because I think Mango didn't return the funds, right? But it was.
No, he did actually return some of the funds.
Okay, maybe it was Mango, but in any scenario, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's actually a criminal matter, and so if the state is mad at you, they will go and arrest you, and so it doesn't matter if you have this civil agreement or this handshake agreement with the protocol. You can still be arrested and charged.
Yeah, on that one, Tom. That one in particular was interesting because he did give back some of the money. He kept loads of it though. But I think what screwed him and why he ended up getting charged is because he was so bombastic. And he taunted the regulators, he taunted the police over and over and over again. And a lot of people who talked to him in some of the Telegram groups and so forth, including myself, were like, "What is wrong with you? Like you've essentially gotten away with the situation. You've gotten lots of money. Why would you then go and publicly just be like the Southern District can suck it, and think like, why would you do that? Like there's just nothing to gain from that. I can't speak on details, but I'm very confident that was a big part of why he was still pursued. It is the case in these situations where there's not a victim left anymore. If most of the money's come back or all the money's come back, there's no victim. In my experience working with with these agencies, they don't really care anymore at that point. They say, you know what, like we're not going to have a participating victim that's going to help us along the path. We do need their participation. We need them to give us logs. So if they're not going to help us, we're not going to help them. Let's just do something else here. But yeah, with him, it was a little bit different.
Interesting. I think I maybe misremembered. It was actually Shakib Ahmed was this guy who hacked an exchange and then returned most of the funds, and they still got him anyway. And so I hear you. I think, hey, the state has limited resources. They might not pursue, this case if no one's really cooperating or sort of helping them out. But, in this scenario, in theory, the exchange agreed to this settlement and they went and got him anyway.
This is a centralized exchange that he hacked?
Yeah.
For some reason, that does feel different to me. I don't know that like there's a good reason for that. Maybe because there is, I don't know, like a terms of service and other elements that are more binding than just code is law. Hey, gentleman's agreement.
But actually, no, sorry, it was a decentralized exchange. I'm like,
It was
we
a
were
decentralized
reading this.
exchange.
Yeah. But no,
Okay,
I
what
hear
was
you
the-
too. Hacking a company is maybe different.
Yeah, and there's more legal precedent.
The legal precedent that is everywhere in the rest of the economy is theft unless 100% is returned. Typically people are being pursued, by the long arm of the law. What's amazing to me is that, there's this expectation still in crypto that it's like, just keep some of it, as long as you don't take it all. And I
Right.
imagine over time that's going to converge with other expectations outside of crypto.
So you think this 10% thing is going to go away?
I mean, can you imagine if it's like, oh, just hack JP Morgan to keep 10% of whatever you hack as a white hat bounty and give back the rest? Like it's funny. I mean, in a sense, to think that that is the standard, and I don't think it'll hold. I think it's a temporary standard. I think it's like a
I think the reason why, so it used to be, so like 3 years ago, right? You hack a protocol and you steal $30 million. You don't keep 3 million, you keep 30, right? Because back in the day, there was much weaker AML rules. Many fewer exchanges were actually enforcing these things. You could move it into stables pretty easily. You could bridge it. There are a lot of ways to kind of make your getaway. In a post-tornado era, in an era where now, Binance and, all these big exchanges are actually being pretty thoughtful about AML, it's much, much, much harder to actually fence the stolen money. And there are few more people who have eyes on it and who are more capable of actually following and tracing those funds. So it seems to me like the reason why we've arrived at 10%, and why not 5%? Why not 1%? Why not a fixed fee? And I think the answer is that it has to do always with the balance of power, which is that the attacker, if they want to sell dirty money, if they want to fence dirty money, they can't get 50 cents on the dollar on it. They can't get 30 cents on the dollar on it. They can probably get something. I think there is some, market rate that they're basically getting of like, look, if you try to sell a stolen Amazon gift card, you're going to get very good conversion ratio on that. If you try to sell a stolen TV, you're going to get a much worse ratio on that.
I mean, I can tell you for sure because I'm the one who did the 10% in the first case.
Oh,
it
wow.
was a message. It was the message that I wrote about a year ago in a different case, and that was the very first time. And it was an attempt to see if we might be able to negotiate, since finding someone didn't always result in them actually returning any cash. And so I was thinking, I have a traditional business background, building tech businesses, and there's a lot of negotiation that goes on, and I like to negotiate. And part of that is, okay, you got to figure out who are you dealing with, why did they do what they did, what's their motivation, and how do they get out of the situation if they're caught, right? And so, depending upon that circumstance, I was thinking to myself exactly how you're saying. It was a calculation. I say, okay, look, so they get $100, let's call it. They're going to have to go to the black market and try to get 50 back. If it's a lot of money, it's going to be hard to even get 50, though. It's hard to wash that through gift cards and things like that. So they're going to have to go to some kind of unscrupulous actor. There's danger in that. There's real danger in that. You go to an unscrupulous actor, you go to the mafia or whatever, some underground. Why would they even give you 50? They know you got 100. They take out 100 of it. So you have real existential risk going through that process. That's the first thing. Second is, the question was, I was thinking, okay, some of these hacks are pretty big, be $30 million, $50 million, $100 million hack, and maybe even bigger. A lot of the time, these guys are just opportunists, right? It's not like they came into this like really planning out, they've already got 20 in the bank and they want another 10 or whatever. It's like they've got $600 in the bank and there smart and they want a way to change their lives, right? And so the approach with the 10% in this particular case, the first case that I did on that was, I was like, I figured out who the guy was, or I was pretty sure who it was. And I'm like, this guy doesn't need all this money. His life has changed with a fraction of this money. And so that's where the negotiation came from. So I said, look, man, we can both walk away. Your life has changed. You've just made a load of money overnight. The protocol continues going on. All these people's life savings don't disappear all of a sudden. All this work that's been going into this protocol doesn't disappear all of a sudden. Everyone walks away a little bit happy, right? And then you can disappear and not worry about having to spend the rest of your life spending every dollar you just stole, making sure someone's not coming after you, because you don't know if the authorities are coming and you don't know who your victims are, right? And you got to be careful with that. If you have a bad victim, that's not, you really need to consider that. There's costs that go into that. So that was kind of the approach, was to try and just put logic behind it, to say, work with us here and we'll walk away. Everyone walks away a little bit happy, a little bit unhappy.
This is fascinating. So Ogle, I would love to hear, so I know you can't comment too much on Kyber specifically, but I'd love to hear, walk us through the narrative of like, let's say not this hack, but a previous hack you've been called into. Tell us a story about what happened, who calls you, when do you enter, how do you find the person, and how do you end up getting in contact and actually structuring that negotiation?
Yeah, I'm specifically curious about the origin story. How do you become a negotiator? Like, how do you become known as the guy? Did you have some training in this? Or did you watch some like YouTube video? I'm just curious.
Is it Liam Neeson, esque?
Yeah,
What?
Yeah.
So I'll answer that question first. So about 2.25 years ago, I've run a big online community with a bunch of folks, and there was a project that came up during the Iron Finance collapse of their token, where Mark Cuban lost loads, tens of millions of dollars overnight. It was a huge news story. Suddenly, people had a lot of stables because they were trying to pull it out of that protocol, and they needed somewhere to put their stables, and so they put their money in different places. But one of those places happened to be this thing called Stable Magnet. It was a Binance Smart Chain thing. It had just launched. It was like basically a nothing protocol. It was launched to be a rug. That was the purpose. But this crew had been rugging $200,000, $100,000 every few months here and there. And suddenly they found themselves with $24 million in their bank, like overnight. And so they were like, okay, let's go. So they rugged. And I was walking through the city, and a friend of mine called me, and he said, people just stole this, stole a bunch of money from a lot of our members. A lot of people in our community, a lot of them got screwed on this. And in fact, you had a little bit of money in there too, because it was a guy who manages some of my money. So I was like, okay. So looking back in the day, the late 90s, early 2000s, I used to do like white hat hacking related stuff in the Web 1 era, let's call it. And so there are a lot of things that you can do with Web 1 and Web 2 techniques that Web 3 hackers don't have any idea about. Like their OPSEC is usually pretty garbage. In fact, like they might really be good at, smart contracts and so forth, but they have no clue how to like hide their tracks. They're dropping cookie crumbles everywhere. And so I said, you know what, who knows? Maybe let's try it out. And so in this case, I went, looked at all their old channels, how their stuff does, and they had left some EXIF data in one of their images, which gave away some information. And from that point, it was like just boom, boom, boom. The tiles started falling. Found the girlfriend, found the guy, found his GitHub, found his friends, saw that they forked, found everything at that point. And so the question was, all right, what do you do? And so there was a victims group with like 1,500 people in it. And I said, well, let me just see if I can talk these guys into giving the money back. I mean, who knows? Because I mean, these are young, these are 20-something year old, 21, 22-year-old guys. I don't want to ruin their lives. We all make mistakes, and this is a serious problem. But if we can get the money back to the victims, maybe there's a way everyone walks away unscathed.
Where were these guys located?
Hong Kong. They were in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And so, I did a lot of research, got their Hong Kong ID numbers, got everything on these people, found their, the parents, everything about them, and then came into one of the victims group. And I was like, I'm sure they're going to be in this victims group monitoring, seeing what people are saying, right? So I said, hey, folks, look, I'm going to help you find this stuff. I think I know who it is. And I just started to talk publicly as if they were listening, because I knew they were. And so I'm like, okay, hackers, I know you're in here. Just so you don't think I'm bluffing, this is the first initial and last initial of your names, and I listed them out. Don't think I'm BSing here. And so then what do they do? Well, at that point, I was tracking them in some other ways. So what do? They fled. They left from Hong Kong. And they flew, and this was during the COVID time. They left from Hong Kong and flew over to England, which was one of the only places you could go easily at that point during COVID. England had a 10-day quarantine period with a bunch of hotels that were set up for that process. I speak Chinese. And so I was having these conversations, and I was like, you know what I can do? I'm just going to call every effing hotel well, I was like, maybe London will be where they go because there's a big Chinatown there. But I was like, no, probably it'll be somewhere smaller because these aren't morons. Let me try Manchester first, and we'll work our way out. So I tried Manchester. I called 140 some odd hotels, and I said, hey, look, I'm the brother of, and I gave the girlfriend's name, and I'm just wondering if she's there. I can't get in touch. I've got a pretty important message. Everyone is every time they answer the phone. We don't have anybody that name here. We don't have anybody by that name here. No one by that name here. Until eventually, one of them said, I'm not allowed to say if we have a guest by that name, but if we do, I'll take the message and I'll give it to them. And if they happen to be here, they'll have the message. And I'm like, bingo, that's the folks, right? And so I said, all right, here's the message. I called back a few minutes later. And I said, you know what? Don't worry about it. She just called me back, and the nice lady was like, I was just about to go upstairs and give her this letter. I said, don't worry about it one bit. So I let the authorities know at that point. The Manchester police, I already had the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. side involved. I said, look, I know where they're at. I know what hotel they're in. Go get them. right? And so eventually, a few days later, it's a longer story, but eventually they did go in there. They got one of the guys, got the money. Then those things started tumbling, and we got all the money back. It was a full recovery. It was the first recovery ever in a DeFi hack, and so I was really excited about that and got a little bit addicted to doing that. They kept nothing.
Holy shit! You
that was a
actually
great
are
story.
Liam Neeson. That's insane. That is insane. Wow.
It was so much fun. No, so that wasn't like, I wasn't like, yeah, keep a few bucks. That wasn't the situation in that, because I was just like, guys, I've been cool with you. Like, you should have given the money, but you're being you're being really stuck up about this, and you're not participating. So fine, screw it. So they got arrested. That process worked out how it did. But then I was thinking, this is something that over time maybe I can start to actually help out people with a little bit and see where it goes. And so fast forward about a year, which would have been about a year ago. I can't remember which project it was, but I was introduced to a project that had money stolen and by a friend of mine at Stargate, and not stolen by a friend of mine at Stargate, but I was introduced by a friend of mine at Stargate at Layer Zero, who introduced me to the team. And at that point, I said, look, let's work on the messaging. Like, finding the person on the chain is not where I think the resources need to be spent, because we've been doing that for years and never results in anything. I think communication is the key here. Like, let's talk to the person and see if we can convince them to do some stuff. And that's where that was kind of the genesis of this whole process. And it worked out. We start getting actual recoveries. So then once that happens, to answer your first question, Haseeb, then, well, one company sees a recovery, another company sees a recovery, then you just start kind of being pulled into the groups, off and on. And, eventually you become the person who writes these messages. In the case, the case where you guys are talking about now, Kyber, I'm advising them on the messaging, but I'm not writing their messaging. And you can tell that in the way it's written, versus the ones I have been involved with, there's like 35, 36 of them in the past year. You can pretty much tell it's me writing the messages. And, a really key part there is, like, I'm not working with companies that are not going to live by what they say, because the integrity of this negotiation is super important. Right. So I was working with a company a few months ago, and they said, I was like, okay, this is the message you should send out. I think we have a good profile on the hacker. This is the way we should approach this to make sure everyone comes away unscathed. And they said, yeah, we're going to do this, and then we're going to turn them into the FBI. And I'm like, well, then I'm not going to work with you, right? I'm not going to do it, because the moment that I'm putting my name there saying, look, I'm helping on this negotiation, and then you go screw them, no one's ever going to actually like participate in these. Like, we have to have, honor amongst thieves here, right? There has to be at least a little bit of that. And so, so that's kind of how that process works. Now I get thrown into these rooms, once in a while to help out. It's a very tiring process. It's frankly a thankless process, because if I'm being honest, you're the messiah for a couple of days, and then you never hear from anybody again. This is all pro bono work, for the most part. And so
I was right about to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's mostly, I mean, people are like, yeah, we're going to give 10% of the recovered money for sure. And then they get the money back, and it's like, yeah, just kidding. I hope you have a good day. We'll talk about it soon. Well done.
Whoa. The people that you recover money for ripped you off.
Oh, dude, it's 50, 60% of them don't even say thank you. Literally. It's kind of amazing. And it's not just, these are teams of people. There are like a lot of people who are in there, and I can throw some names that are really great. Like Alicia Katz is in a lot of these groups. Tay is in them. Sam CZ's son. There's I really could list out, 6, 7, 8 people who do great work in their own ways. Like Alicia's good at organizing. Sam is good at the security side, all this kind of stuff. But honestly, like, I don't want to like be negative, but it's kind of disgusting, to be honest, like the amount of or the lack of the amount of even like, thank you, appreciate it, guys. Here's a pizza that you get from these folks a lot of times.
I'm disgusted on your behalf. I mean, that's unfortunate. Like, you would think that a project that you've saved would honor their commitments to you.
I mean, even if there's not a commitment, because you don't like, you're not like explicitly saying, hey, look, give me, this, a lot of times some people do, but that's not the way I work. I'm always like, look, I'll help you. I'm happy to help. And I'm happy to help these people for free. It doesn't matter to me. I just don't want to be told, hey, if this happens, this happens. And I'm like, okay, great. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a good day. And then it just doesn't happen. That it's a little bit frustrating, that sort of thing. I will say there are some outliers though. Like, for example, Alchemix. I worked on the Alchemix hack, which was part of the Curve hack. Alchemix couldn't have been cooler about everything. I mean, they were perfect. Like, they were from the get-go. They were so appreciative, so thankful, giving all the access to the information you need. At the end of it, worked with their DAO to like support the security work that I'm doing and the team that I've got to pay out of my own pocket. They were super cool all the way through the whole process. And if that was the case always, you would have a lot more people like me helping out these protocols, right? But as it is, there's loads of time, loads of effort, and there's real risk involved in it, because people don't like you suddenly because you just screwed their theft up, right? And to have that be a situation where you're not being taken care of at all, even from like a psychological level, it's not very motivating for other people to get involved and help out too.
What do you find to be the best tactic or tactics in negotiating with these hackers? And maybe the flip side of that, what are the big mistakes protocols make when they're trying to get their money back?
The big mistake, I think, is not profiling who the attacker is. And so a lot of times the protocols are freaking out, right? They have a lot of anxiety and they have a lot of pressure from their community to hurry up and get something done. And so one of the first things that myself or like Alicia, for example, will say is take it easy. Step back. For now, tell your community, we got it under control. We're sorting it out, but we're not going to talk about it until we have something to say, right? So, and actually stick to it, right? This is a big mistake people make, these protocols make, is they talk too much and they say things on accident that give away where they're at with the, with the search. Maybe they say, oh, we're not quite sure yet where he is, but we think we found. Don't say that. Right? Don't say that. Even if it's true, you don't say it. You keep everything to yourself. Let it be a question. That's the first thing. Second is not profiling the hacker properly from a technical point of view. Like, for example, the Kyber hack is very well done. That's a complicated hack. This person's an expert. And so when you're negotiating with this person, you're not going to talk to them like they're an idiot, because they're not. Right? It's just going to piss them off. Clearly they have an ego. So you're not going to talk to them like that. You want to treat them with the respect that in a certain sense they deserve. Right. But you also want to make sure that everyone's aligned on getting to the other side of this, coming out not as harmed. And then third, I think that I'm not really sure how to say it, but just keeping control of one's own, making sure to get rest, making sure to act as a team, being organized, things like that is something that a lot of times these folks don't do. And it screws things up because you have 3 people doing the same thing, overlapping jobs and this sort of thing. And it creates distrust sometimes. It creates just a waste of time. And it's also people get in the way of each other and fall over their feet. Right. And so being super organized, shutting up for a while, and then thinking through how can we get through this situation in a way that's not vengeful, it's not angry, it's not sad, it's just logical. How can we get through this in a way that's going to get us out of it smoothly and make sure that the other person feels like they're getting a good, good outcome too. Everyone needs to come away a winner. You guys are negotiators, right? You don't ever walk away from negotiation saying, I got everything and they got nothing.
The Kyber attacker has taken your advice about being well rested. And
I think you're exactly right. That was so interesting, right? Again, I don't want to talk too much about about this one in particular, but this guy's approach is very different. And I think it is an evolution in a certain way of how these are probably going to, how these might get done in the future. This is a really interesting modification to the normal. And I think it does say a lot of things about other topics that I'm happy to talk about, but I feel like I've been kind of monologuing for 4 minutes already, so I'll be quiet.
No, look, we brought you on here to hear your perspective, so we love the monologue. I guess the other question I'd ask is, you've been through, it sounds, a lot of negotiations. It sounds like 3 a month from what you were describing. What are you seeing in terms of patterns? What's changed over the last couple of years in the profile of these attackers? But also, what do they tend to look like? Where do they tend to be from? What are their skill levels, backgrounds, countries? Help us get a picture of what you're seeing when you're interacting with these folks.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, 3 out of 4 times they're Asian folks, I would say. Maybe a little bit higher than that, coming out of Singapore, coming out of Hong Kong, coming out of mainland China, sometimes Vietnam, places like that. But almost always, I would say 75% of the time it's coming out of Asia. And you can tell this via writing patterns and stuff a lot of times. And that's another thing you look for is writing patterns. You can tell where someone's at, in that way. But 3/4 of them are that. And almost everybody's very young. These are kids.
How young usually is very young?
20, 19, 23. These are young folks who've gone through engineering school potentially, or maybe they have just, done hacking for the past 6-8 years on their own, learning or whatever. They're very skilled usually. They usually don't have any money. They come from kind of tough backgrounds a lot of times. I've actually become kind of friends. I know it sounds weird, but I've become what I might call social friends in a certain sense with a few of these people because, they are I'm the only person a lot of them have ever talked to about this stuff. Their family doesn't know. Their friends don't know what's happened, but I do, right? And so I can talk to them and say, hey, how's everything going? Are you cool now? Is everything all right? And they'll talk to me about what music they're listening to. And, these are okay people sometimes who just saw an opportunity and took it. They saw $500 on the ground and picked it up, and I think that, that's an important thing here too, is keeping in mind, these are mostly young people. And my goal is not to destroy a young person's life, no matter what they did. It's your brain, your prefrontal cortex is not quite developed at that point yet. You're making stupid decisions. We're all driving too fast, right? And just guiding them in the right direction and trying to keep it where their life isn't ruined, but they're also not ruining anyone else's life, is usually the goal that I come into it with.
And what have you seen change over the last couple of years as you've been interacting with some of these incidents?
Well, the frequency has certainly changed, as in it's gone up a lot. The ability to get away, technically speaking, has gone down a lot. Like you guys were speaking about earlier, it's a lot harder to wash through online platforms. There's ways of doing it, but it's much harder. The sleuths have gotten way better at finding, at just tracing down these people. So even if they're using something like Tornado, like you're not getting, like, there's ways to figure out with high probability who you are, especially if you're working with big amounts of money. And so I would say, yeah, the frequency has gone up a lot, but also the ability to capture them has gone up a lot. And therefore the entrance of negotiations, I think, is appropriate. It's like the right time for that kind of thing in the past couple of years. I will say too, that on the white hat bounty side of things, they have not caught up on this at all. So companies are paying garbage rates for really important bounties, and they're not incentivizing these people to actually give them the information. So like, you're sort of asking for it in a certain way. I don't want to blame the victims really, but if you're saying, I, for example, found an exploit recently in a popular place where people publish their posts. Okay, let's call it that. And I wrote to them on the bug bounty program. I don't need the money, but I wrote to them on the bug bounty program, and I said, hey, look, this is the thing. How do you feel about this? And didn't even get a response. And so I followed up 2 weeks later, and I said, look, I'm going to publish this exploit like existence on Twitter if you don't respond to me, at least, because this is still existent 2 weeks later. They respond back, okay, sorry, yeah, we didn't respond. We'll fix it soon. I respond back, okay, what level of bug bounty does this qualify for? Ghosted again, right? So it's like, so that's my experience going through this in like a really low level. I could have just deployed the exploit, screwed people out of a couple $100,000 before it was caught, and walked away. And so the incentive, if your goal is to actually make money here, is so skewed toward being bad, because the good side like supports it so little that the industry is like it's just asking for these problems, I think.
That is very true. It does seem almost impossible to really fully remedy that imbalance, right? Because it's always going to be the case that protocols can't afford to pay out a 10% bug bounty of the amount of money that would have been attacked, because at a certain point, those losses have to get socialized among their users, right? They can't absorb that off their own balance sheets. And so in order for the protocols to assume that they're default alive, they have to be able to say, like, look, well, I only have so much money that I can really devote towards security audits and bug bounties. Otherwise, the users wouldn't tolerate it, right? If somebody tells their user, hey, guess what? A white hat showed up and they found some great hack, so 10% of your funds is going bye-bye. Like there'd be a mutiny, right? So it's never going to be as advantageous to be a white hat as to be a black hat. But you're right, the imbalance is so severe that a lot of white hats can't make a living being a white hat. Like, they have to find other sources of work, unless they're really,
these are two different
really
dollars.
good.
These are $2 right? $10 of dirty money is the same as 50 cents of clean, or $1 of clean. Like, you don't need to have 10% of the stuff going out. That's okay. The dirty money, nobody wants that crap. Like, if these people, these skilled folks, could reliably say, look, if I find a problem in a protocol where I could have stolen $250 million, I could black hat it and keep 25, or I can white hat it and you'll give me $1 million. Like, I bet you almost everyone's going to say, screw it, I'm white hatting this thing. It's clean, it's above the board, and I can do it all day long. I can spend my life doing this. I can get a team of people. I can build a business on this, whatever. But right now, it's like, a clean hack. You come to someone, there's $250 million on the line. And if they respond to you, which a lot of times they don't, they'll give you 10 grand, 20 grand. It's just so far off,
Just to flip this on its head a little bit, we've spent a lot of time talking about, the process of resolving a hack after it's occurred. From your vantage point, is there anything that projects can do before an incident to prepare for the possibility of an incident ahead of time? Or are there things that you would tell any protocols out there today that they should think about? How do you think about, the preemptive approach to this?
Yeah, sure. So, besides penetration testing and audits and, that sort of thing, just the disaster response part, I think is really important, Robert. The part about organizing yourself and being chill and that kind of thing. And so to that end, so I have done a little bit of that for some different protocols that have asked me for it. And that's something that through a small security company I've got, they'll say, hey, look, can you put us through a drill kind of a thing? Sam C's son started up a group called SEAL Team 6. And I think they're doing this kind of stuff soon, or they might already be doing it. I'm involved in that only in the sense that I'm helping a little bit with a guide they're writing, but I'm not actually on the SEAL team thing, just to be clear. But yeah, so I think those kind of things would be really useful. It costs so little, but then your team's already ready. They've got a Notion ready where all the data is going into. They've got the Google Docs ready. They got the Drive ready for sharing the files. They've got the Telegram war room already set up for everyone to be joining in there. They know the list of people they're going to be calling in the case of an attack. It's a day of prevention that might save the entire company later on down the road.
That makes sense. And last question I have for you, Ogle, what would you like to see change in the industry or in the kind of security practices going forward?
Oh gosh, first off, I think the imbalance we were talking about earlier needs to be fixed. Second, I think that projects paying for their own audits and deciding if it gets published or not needs to be fixed. I find audits as marketing to be kind of disgusting and really, really, the incentives are really misaligned there for the public versus what's supposed to be happening. I think there's solutions for this, actually having proper code review, writing tests, actually having reasonable, having reasonable coding practices. That'd be a good improvement. Just catching up to Web 2, really. A lot of ways, I love Web3 stuff. I've been in this essentially since the beginning, been in crypto since 2012 before, a long time ago, but Web2 just does it better on a lot of the stuff. It's had the time to screw up and it's matured, but a lot of the people in Web3 are screw Web2. Everything about Web2 sucks. It's the old way of thinking. Okay, sure. But sprints in development are useful. QA is actually a good thing to do. These are important parts of the process that you should be doing before you deploy a contract out there that people are putting their hard-earned money into. It's even more important in these cases because in traditional Web 2 stuff, you're not holding people's money, right? But now you are. You have a responsibility, in my opinion, to really, really, really get this stuff right. And it goes the opposite way, where people just don't pay any attention at all.
That is terrifying that there are people out there who are writing smart contracts without tests. some of those things I'm like, okay,
yeah, it happens. It should embarrass the entire industry when it does happen.
Okay. Well, Ogle, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. You're doing the Lord's work. Please let us know what's the closest pizza shop so we can buy you several pizzas. Also, if you're looking for, how can people find you if they want to get in touch with you or if they're looking for some security assistance?
Yeah, sure. So my Twitter is at Cryptogle, CRYPTOGLE. Same thing on Telegram. People can hit me up if there's an emergency at that same username. Oglesecurity.com is where I do some stuff, but I'm not leaning into that, to be honest with you. It's just kind of there in case someone needs, an insurance or they want to do some philanthropy and be nice to me. It's very rarely used. Just Twitter is it's probably the best place to chat. And yeah, just between us, you can edit this part out if you want to, but I'm building, I told you I'm building an L1, been building it for about a year and a half now. And it's very, very heavily focused on security, user experience, things like that to try and solve some of these problems that do exist. And I think we're going to, including the audit problem, we're going to be doing all the audits and stuff, And so I think that just a little bit of time down the road, again, you can edit all this crap out, but I'm just telling you guys down the road, I think we're going to be in a situation that's a lot better than how it is now. I'm going to bring in some of those Web 2 old school, geezerly ways into, the chains and actually make it safe for users, I hope.
That's great to hear. Well, you're doing the Lord's work, and anybody who's listening, please buy this man a pizza because he deserves some thanks for all.
Thank you, and I'm so hungry too. I'm so hungry.
Okay, great. All right,
all right. Take care, fellas.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely, good to meet you. That
was hardcore. I was not expecting it to be quite.
I was not expecting that to end with I'm making an L1.
Well, good for him. Good for him. You know,
I mean, it just was like, it was like so focused on application level and higher, and then it's like, nope, making an L1.
Look, only infrastructure gets funded in this industry. You know that. Come on.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm part of the problem, part of the solution.
You're mostly the problem. I mean, I think all four of us are part of the problem.
Yeah.
But
all right.
Oh well. All right, cool. So I think we probably have time for just one more story. So
just one.
One of the big stories, just one, I think. Well, so the one of the big dramas that's been taking place aside from hacks has been a new L2 called Blast. Speaking of infrastructure, so Blast is launched by Pac-Man, who is the founder of Blur, the NFT exchange, in which we are investors, full disclosure. So Blast was described as being a layer 2 that is going to have what's called native yield. And so native yield basically means you deposit assets into the L2 bridge. So you're moving some ETH, you're moving some USDC or whatever. And Blast will take that ETH or that USDC and it will deposit it, the ETH into Lido, the stables into Maker, in order to give you yield that rebases on the L2. So the idea is people are on these L2s, they have capital that's just sitting around there doing nothing in the bridge. Why not make sure that you get some extra yield for just sitting around there doing whatever you're doing? And eventually Blur is going to also be, built on top of Blast, or it's going to move onto Blast, something along those lines. So he raised about $20 million for Blast from Paradigm, Standard Crypto, and a bunch of crypto angels. And it turns out that this project, which was announced, a little bit over a week ago now, is already ready for deposits. So you can deposit money into Blast nominally and start getting some yield, as well as getting points that will presumably result in an airdrop. The problem is that Blast does not exist. So there is no L2, there is no platform, there is no smart contract, there's nothing. There's just a multisig right now. And this multisig, as of today, about a little bit over a week, is currently holding $620 million in deposits that have been deposited into this more or less multisig. Over 50,000 users have deposited funds into this thing. There's a 3-month period during which nobody can withdraw. So this money is just going to sit in that multisig for 3 months. And this has made a lot of people very upset. This contract, the multisig, has 5 signers on the multisig, but it has not been revealed who the signers are. So normally when there's a signer, if you look on, Polygon has a multisig, a bunch of these protocols, a bunch of L2s have multisigs, Arbitrum, Optimism, et cetera. They all have multisigs. But usually the signers of the multisigs are known entities. They're people in the community who are already docs, and so people know, okay, I can trust this set of 5 community leaders or whatever.
You also have the ability to withdraw. I think that's the
also you have the ability to withdraw as well.
I think that's the part where it feels like we went back to 2017, right? No withdrawal.
Worse than 2017. I mean,
it's a loot box.
It's a lot. But here's the thing: in the old school lock drops, it was literally like, "Hey, this is programmatically locked, and we can't steal your money." Lock drop. Like I remember those lock drops, and they weren't put $620 million in a multi-sig that doesn't belong to you. The original lock drops were at least contractually enforced that said you're going to be able to get your money out in 90 days, period, full stop.
Yeah, so the story is that there's been a lot of criticism about the security of the multi-sig, the withdrawal policy, the referral scheme. There's like a referral program where if you bring more people in, you get more points. So questionable marketing tactics. The sort of yield on yield promises, and the endorsement by all these VCs and crypto influencers. Pac-Man, the founder of Blur and the founder of Blast, came out and defended the project and made clear that Paradigm, who was a lead investor, did not necessarily agree with all their tactics, but they decided to go through with it anyway. And then a few days ago, Paradigm came out and publicly criticized Blast launch, because I think Paradigm was facing a lot of heat for their involvement with Blast. And Paradigm basically said, look, we talked to the Blast team. we don't agree with the way we're doing this. We think it cheapens the project. But they're great guys and something. So it seems like a lot of people are upset, but not quite. So to be clear, we are not investors into Blast, but it seems like the people who are investors into Blast are kind of saying like, oh, we don't like that people seem to be upset, and somehow they're directing this anger at us. So we will kind of disaffiliate ourselves publicly from this. But of course, they already own the tokens, and they're
or
the right,
future rights to tokens.
The future rights to tokens, I should say. Yes, the tokens don't exist yet.
For Blast, I mean, a few things. I think there's a few lines of criticism, as you've said. One, people don't like the way the yield is being phrased, saying, hey, this is not, risk-free yield. There is risk associated with these sorts of yield. People don't like the multi-sig, and people don't like the marketing around it, right? There's a kind of cute diagram where they show one person referring many people, and those people referring many people that look suspiciously like a sideways pyramid.
Look. This is just decentralized Herbalife, and we've decentralized Bill Ackman by the crypto Twitter people.
Bill Ackman lost the Herbalife, by the way. So I don't know if that's the best comp.
No. I think my hot take on this is a little bit like the genie's out of the bottle about like, hey, people actually want $600 million went into this, and like my ZK rollup that I worked really hard on for 3 years has like 30 million. So like, I guess we all have to offer yield. I think it's going to become this arms race.
Totally.
It's like, I agree the marketing was distasteful and whatever, but if we look back on this in 6 months, I'll make the prediction now. We're going to be like, oh, okay, I guess every L2 is offering this. It's like, it does feel like it's a one-way function. In that
totally.
sense.
I think the product is great, actually, right? The trend in DeFi has been moving towards more sort of base yield rebasing products, and then nesting those in those things like staked ETH is larger than ETH in Aave. Staked ETH is larger than ETH in MakerDAO. It makes it better for protocols, but you don't have to compete with sort of this risk-free rate that people are comfortable taking the risk on.
I prefer calling it a risk neutral rate. You are
risk neutral rate. Yeah, there's a little bit, but certainly it's sort of broadly accepted that, hey, we were comfortable with these levels of risk. Is the way the market is moving, and the market is sort of speaking. And unfortunately, if you want to use staked ETH the way you would normally use ETH in DeFi or in other applications on Ethereum, it's kind of a pain in the ass because it's this weird ERC rebasing token that you can't use like normal native ETH. You can't pay for gas with it necessarily. And so I think enshrining it and sort of making a first party product that is doing what people already want to do makes a ton of sense to me. And obviously, again, the market is sort of speaking to it. The multi-sig thing, I also agree, was kind of goofy. You should probably have at least a time lock on it, or have some sort of like base. I mean, if it's an OP stack fork, effectively like have sort of a verifier contract. Like,
wait, but it's an OP stack fork, but not super chain apparently, right? It's
yes,
like not going to
yes,
join.
It's
right?
too. I think it's too forked from OP stack with their whole rebasing thing, so it's a little different. So that was a little goofy, but I think the flip side here is, hey, they've created an immense amount of hype around the product. They front run all these other rollups that have basically been sleeping. Like their go to market has been total shit, which is why no one actually wants to use these like random long tail L2s. And now Scroll or Blast basically invented this idea, and they had the momentum, and so anyone else is going to look at fast followers.
Was that a
yeah, I kind of should on Scroll, but they kind of came to mind where I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? But
hey, as a Scroll investor, I will stand up for them. I think that they went the right way.
Go to market bad, they can fix it. But I think it reminds me of. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Blur, where there's these invisible lines in crypto that people don't want to touch, right? We have to pay royalties to artists, or we NFTs are about the art. It's not about trading. And I think Pac-Man is actually a great founder in being able to violate those lines and say, no, actually, this is wrong. This is what the market wants, and the market speaks and says, yeah, that's correct.
Yes, I take your points that clearly this is something the market is speaking that it wants. Although, to be clear, it doesn't actually have this yet. So I don't think people actually can say with certainty that, yes, this is the thing that's going to get traction. I can see just as much that a lot of that capital leaves the moment the airdrop hits. Just because, like, okay, do people really want like an L2 with rebasing? Like,
I think what people want are applications on L2s. And what do devs want? they want TVL. They want, capital that's there, that's ready to deploy, that's ready to use their applications. And so I actually can see this being very popular with devs as well.
It's not, we're not turning back from this. This is like, it's like restaking, like all the things where everyone is going to be very angry about the rehypothecation implied, the sort of like implied leverage. The market always wants that in this industry way more than anything else. And like the moment someone offers it even a tiny bit, there'll be like a ton of capital that chases it. I think there's no way back. I bet you we will see every other L2 do the same thing. There's this kind of, it's just like unfortunate. In some ways, there will be some extra systemic risk, unfortunately. But like the point is, like it's definitely there's no way everyone doesn't copy it.
I think this is way too strong of a claim. Like these are airdrop farmers. Everyone here is literally they're not using the product. There's no product. So if they launch the L2 and the L2 gets developers and applications, then yes, maybe there's a ghost of an argument there. But this is like the airdrop to end all airdrops. That's why people are here. And every marginal dollar that gets contributed, like, right now there's a futures market for Blast on Avo, very, very low liquidity, but it's being priced at like north of $1 billion FTV. So clearly the market expects that this is going to be a massive fucking airdrop. And that's why they're putting all this money in a one-way multi-sig with no product. So it's possible. It's possible that this takes over the world.
No. But the reason I say this is like, again, from the perspective of a layer 2 developer, there's a million of them now, right? Because there's all these stacks, all these software kits to make it like I can do it on the weekend as a hobby project. I'm not saying those ones will be successful. I'm just saying the tech barrier has gone down enough that there's inevitably a lot of people who look at the $600 million in Blast and are like, I can do better. And that just starts the foot race. Like, I think don't underestimate that part of the market. The foot race will happen now.
I agree. Not to use the wrong word, but I think it is a paradigm shift in how people think about L2s. I mean, truly, because like...
You might say we're shifting to a different standard.
Oh, even better. But I agree with Tarun. I think that over time, other L2s are going to figure out how to have a neutral yield to it. And I do think it's actually a really elegant solution to call it restaking, call it, whatever, where you don't have to worry about losing the yield inherent in your Ether when you bridge it over to an L2. And I think that is fundamentally incredibly powerful. And I think, I don't know if Blast is going to be the one that actually achieves adoption on top of this, but I do agree with Tarun. I think most L2s over time are going to find a way for you not to have this opportunity cost loss of the Ether staking yield when your Ether is bridged to that L2. And I think they've stumbled on a very natural economic principle here. And I think there's massive risks. I think like Tarun's underselling the risks. Like,
I'm not trying to say there's no risk. I'm just saying that, like, everyone is going to close their eyes and pretend they're not there because like they see the TVL. Like, of course, there's tons of risk.
Yeah, this is gonna an L2 or multiple L2s, including potentially Blast, are going to implode in a spectacular shit show of duration mismatch at some point.
SVB on chain.
It's going to be SVB on chain, like without a doubt. It might not be Blast. It might be some copycat who makes this. The knowledge of these systems decreases with every fork from the original. But one of these L2s is going to implode at some point because, taking all the Ether, turning it into staked Ether, works great on the way up. There's no slippage.
But the withdrawal queue might be 6 months and everyone is suddenly rushing to that.
That's why I don't think you can abstract that much over the details about this. Like, it's not being in a money market.
My point is, I'm not saying, like, I'm the first one to tell you there's a ton of fucking risk here. There's a reason I said we have to stop fucking calling it risk free. That's the most infuriating part about most of the advertising to me, is like everyone just talks about being fucking risk free, which is absolutely not true. It's actually risk neutral because you're not even you don't even care about the variance because you're using it all the time.
Right.
I just think there's kind of this thing of like, inevitably there's just the foot race, right? It's like the foot race downhill. And like, I just don't see like people are going to look at that TVL and they're like, why did I spend so much time building a really elegant L2? But this thing that's a multi-sig has 20x the TVL. That incentive, that type of like forcing function inevitably causes people to copy. Like, how could that not happen?
I think that's definitely true for a lot of emerging L2s, right? I think some of them are going to say, hey, this is a strategy to juice the yield and get me some extra money, right? In the same way that JP Morgan pays you almost nothing on your deposits and small regional banks pay you like almost 5%, right? Because they really desperately want your deposits.
What else is the roll-up revolution other than unbundling the main bank Ethereum?
Look, I think when people realize that, like, okay, now I have to figure out the taxes on my auto rebasing currency. Now I have to figure out, like, oh, I wanted to withdraw my money to like go hedge something, and I can't because it's stuck in a withdrawal queue. And like, there's all this complexity that is going to show up in places where people don't expect that complexity, and they're going to realize this is not a free lunch.
Like, they realize too late. They realize too late. They realize too late. That's they're real. Like,
yeah, but it's not going to be like Arbitrum and OP Mainnet and all these things start doing this.
But the
right?
problem
is
these emerging
no.
The problem is these SDKs for doing your own rollup, OPSAC, Orbit.
Yeah, people may fork blast. People may fork blast.
My point is, like, they make it so that every single one of these side rollups is. Why would they not do that, right? Like, it's such an easy thing. Also, account abstraction actually makes it much easier to make this a native gas model for a lot of wallets, and you're actually outsourcing how that conversion gets done to the paymasters. So I actually think some of the technological changes make this even easier to just copy pasta everywhere.
Sure, but the withdrawals, like, I would bet a lot of money that this is going to be done manually at first, right? That to actually get the money withdrawn from Lido and get the stuff with Maker and not end up paying too much slippage or whatever. That stuff is going to be done manually in the beginning because it's just the fastest way to get things off the ground. In which case, at some point, someone's going to fuck up. At some point, something's going to go down. At some point, something is going to go wrong, and people realize, oh, we don't have everything quite in place yet for this to feel seamless. Maybe someday it will.
I agree. I agree with you, but I don't think that means that people aren't going to just copy even a half-assed type of thing.
Totally they will. Totally they will. But it sounds like what you guys are describing is a kind of maximalism that this is, or almost accelerationism, right? This is inevitable. All rollups are going in this direction, and this is what the future of rollups will all look like. It'll all be rebasing, Lido-based, Maker-based, blah, blah, blah.
No,
which, by the way, if you believe you should be super bullish on Lido and Maker.
I know you want the EA version of fucking safety, like roll-up safety. Roll-up safety. We moved from AI safety to roll-up safety.
I think there is a truth to this, though. I think, frankly, Haseeb, what you sound like a little bit is like Bitcoin maxis in like 2013. I think there will be a tipping point if they can actually attract the best devs to the platform. Then it's kind of game over. But I think till that point, you're right. We'll see. But I think like it's hard to say that they don't enshrine or believe in certain principles that we believe in, and therefore like it's not going to work, or there's this technical complication they can't overcome. Like. I think history has shown that, hey, at a certain point, this stuff can be figured out, and these things can just build massive flywheels that are just like very difficult to break.
Yeah, look, my heuristic is that simplicity wins. To do this is so complex and has so many pointy edges that everybody now has to think about. If you have your money in a roll-up that's doing this shit, you have to think about it. And that is the reason why I think it's not going to be the default. Some people may choose to do this, especially if you're trading on Blur. I think this is great because Blur, whatever, you have some passive liquidity sitting there. You want some extra yield, fine. If you use Blur, this is part of the equation. But are people going to do everything in environments that are built up like this? I think the answer is no, because it's too complex.
People will certainly try for a while though before they realize.
They will definitely try.
That's I think more the fundamental.
Right. Anyway, all right, we got to wrap. Thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back next week. See y'all.